to 2 Kings chapter 5, and we will meet there in just a moment and get started. Wanted to start off by saying some things, that are pertaining to this lesson. One is that, sometimes you hear a good title to a lesson and you just take it and run with it. Years ago, I was at a lectureship, and one of the preachers that got up, he used to preach every Wednesday night at this lectureship, and he got up and he was preaching on 2 Kings 5. Now, I can't remember what the title of his lesson was, but I got the title of this lesson from him because he kept just saying this over and over again, and it just stuck with me, and he just kept saying, "Get over yourself and get in the water." And so, get over yourself and get in the water. So, as we go through this lesson, I want you to think about some things that are pertaining to salvation and seeing how these things kind of coincide. And so, let's look at Naaman, if you will, and start off with this. You have a great man with a greater problem. In 2 Kings 5, verse 1, it says, "Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and honorable, because by him Jehovah had given victory unto Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper." And so leprosy, of course, throughout the Bible, is a representation of sin and is synonymous with sin. Not that you have to have sinned in order to get leprosy. That's not the case, but that the thought process between the two kind of coincides. Leprosy spreads, starts off small, spreads. Sin starts off small, spreads. And it's the idea. So leprosy will destroy you, and sin will also destroy you. And so you see that there. But Naaman's healing came down to a simple issue, and that is the idea of humility. Now, a lot of times we don't talk about that when it comes to Naaman, but let's do that this morning. I want to mention this. This is something that you probably don't see a whole lot. Matter of fact, most commentaries don't say this, but it is Jewish tradition. Now, that doesn't mean that it is so, but it is Jewish tradition that I'm about to tell you in just a moment. If you would, look at 1 Kings 22 with me. In 1 Kings 22. So I'm going to reference this because I think that it makes sense. Now, like I said, tradition doesn't make it so, but it makes sense. And I want to start off by showing you this because not everybody looks at it this way. And I think it makes a whole lot of sense if it is so. But think about this. In 2 Kings 5, in verse 1, it says that Naaman is the captain of the host of the king of Syria. He's called a great man and honorable. Now here's a key phrase. Because by him, Jehovah, so God, because by him, Jehovah had given victory unto Syria. Now, look at 1 Kings 22 with me. And if you look at some of the verses here leading up to, there's too much to cover. But verse 33 and following, actually we can back up to 31. "Now the king of Syria had commanded the 32 captains of his chariots, saying, Fight neither with small nor great, save only with the king of Israel. And it came to pass, when the captains of the chariot saw Jehoshaphat, that they said, Surely it is the king of Israel. And they turned aside to fight against him. And Jehoshaphat cried out. And it came to pass, when the captains of the chariot saw that it was not the king of Israel, that they turned back from their pursuing him. And a certain man drew his bow at venture, and smote the king of Israel between the joints of the armor. Wherefore he said unto the driver of his chariot, Turn thy hand, and carry me out of the host, for I am sore wounded. And the battle increased that day, and the king was stayed up in his chariot against the Syrians. and died at even, and the blood ran out of the wound in the bottom of the chariot. And there went a cry throughout the host about the going down of the sun, saying, every man to his city, and every man to his country. And so, the tradition goes like this. Naaman is the archer. Now, it does make sense, because when you look at Syria having prevailed, this is it. Very well could be Naaman here, being the archer that loosed that arrow and shot the king. Now, you think about this great man, and you think about the success that he has had, but his success could not save him. He's a great man. He's honorable. He's a mighty man of valor. We've seen that in verse 1. And yet, here it says, yet he was a leper. Now, we've mentioned this before, that when you look at leprosy during the time of the Bible, you can work with leprosy today. You can get, cure it and whatnot. We've got things that we can take care of it with it. But back in this time, this was almost a death sentence. If you got leprosy, you were pretty much going to die. That was all there was to it. And so, you think about all the things that he had. Wealth couldn't save him. Status could not save him. Power could not save him. Well, let's think about this. When it comes to us today, when it comes to the religious world, when you think about salvation, none of those things can save you either, right? When it comes to salvation, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what kind of status you have, It doesn't matter how much power you have. None of those things can save you. The only thing that can save you is by being obedient to the will of God. That's it. You can say, well, don't you know who I am? Sometimes people do that. Don't you know who I am? And don't you just love it when you have no idea who they are, right? No, I have no idea. Don't you know who I am? Don't you know how much money I have? Don't you know how successful I have been? It doesn't matter. None of those things matter. And so his success couldn't save him. But here's another interesting thing. The answer came from an unlikely source. Look at verses 2 and 3 with me. And the Syrians had gone out in bands and had brought away captives out of the land of Israel a little maiden. And she waited on Naaman's wife, and she said unto her mistress, would that my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, then would he recover from his leprosy. Let me ask you a question here. So you've got this captive servant girl. She says, if only he were with the prophet that is in Samaria, this would all be taken care of. Well, here's a couple of things. Number one, don't dismiss the message because of the messenger. You might not think very highly of the messenger, but don't dismiss the message. God uses humble voices all the time. God uses people that we wouldn't expect. Matter of fact, when you think about this, and you think about this person in particular, do we know their name? Do we know the name of this girl? We don't. What do we know about her? Very little, right? But let me ask you a question. Did she mean something to at least Naaman and his wife? Absolutely. And so when it comes to becoming a Christian, where does the message usually come from? Think about that. You think about what the worldly thought process would be here. They'd be looking for a priest, right? They'd be looking for some kind of a religious teacher of some kind, right? And many times that's the thought process that enters into the church. But who is it that really brings people to Christ? Who is that? It's everyone. It's you and me. It's all of us. It's not just, well, you know what, we're just going to, make sure that they come and they hear the preaching. And I tell you what, I try to work on my lessons here, but I'm telling you right now that my experience when it comes to preaching is that it is far more effective to sit down and have a Bible study with somebody than it is to have them come in and listen to 100 sermons. They might not get it in 100 sermons. You have to really teach people. You have to sit down and teach them. And so when it comes to becoming a Christian, the message usually comes from someone that they know. It's not someone that is in the mind of the religious world as being someone high up, but maybe it's a coworker that brings someone to Christ. Maybe it's a classmate. Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's a friend, but they bring them to the teacher, and it is done in a humble way. Now let's talk about this. Let's think about when pride gets in the way. Naaman expected kind of a different solution, you know this passage, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So, of course, he's prepared for this. He brings money and clothes and influence with him, right? And it says, and the king of Syria said, go now, I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 pieces of gold and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, and now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. Now, that's a lot. I mean, there are times when you see this happening in the Scripture. You actually see this happening outside of the Bible during, all kinds of times, really, even up until today, that, you can go and do something as long as you have the proper documentation, right? And during this time, hey, if the king says, hey, I'm sending you out, nobody bothers that person. You know why nobody bothers that person? Because war could happen if you bothered them. If you did anything to them, you harassed them in any kind of way, then you could start a major altercation, right? And so, they're sent, with all these possessions, 10 changes of raiment, which is a lot, by the way, and then all of this money, all these possessions are brought. Also, the name of the king is behind Naaman, and he goes, and when he goes into this land, we get a different response from the king of Israel than expected, right? Look at verse 7. And it came to pass when the king of Israel had read the letter that he rent his clothes. Now, that's pretty extreme, right? You wouldn't expect that, but that's what happens. He comes to him, he rents his clothes and said, am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? I can't do this. But consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh quarrel against me. He's trying to start a fight here. That's what's going on. He's trying to start a fight. And so, it seems that he is just thinking politically here. That's all he's thinking about. Look at verses 8 and 9. It says, and it was so, when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent unto the king, saying, wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariots, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And we see something else that happens here. We see that he gets offended by the simplicity of things, right? I mean, he's come with this whole entourage, right? And then you see in verse 10, Elisha sent a messenger unto him saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. Now here's where the problem starts coming up, right? Here's where the pride and the expectations come in, right? Can't even, you think about that, right? I mean, I could understand this a little bit. If you are a young man hopefully nobody in here has done this, but if you're a young man and you are desire to date some young woman, and you have offered to go and pick her up and go do something, and you drive up to her house, of course, parents inside, proper thing to do would be what? Get up, go to the door, knock on the door, ring doorbell, whatever. You know, sir or madam, my name is, and then you're going about your business. What the wrong thing to do would be is you pull up and you go, "Burp," you know, like that's not gonna sit well, right? You know what Dad's gonna do? I'll tell you what I would do. I'd come out and be like, "Hey, buddy, let's try that again." All right? You think that's cool? All right. Well, you can come to the door, and I'm going to go back inside, and I'm going to determine how this goes. And so you better make that greeting really good, okay? You come and you shake my hand and you say some nice things, and then I might let my daughter go with you, right? That would be how that would go. And so here it is. Brings a whole entourage, and then he can't even get up out of the chair, right? Doesn't even come outside. And here Naaman goes, "Are you kidding me? I came all this way to see the prophet, and then he tells me that I need to just go and wash in the Jordan?" Now, it doesn't stop there, you know. If you think about this, going back to the beginning of what we said, that the tradition here of Naaman being the one that loosed that arrow, do you think that maybe some pomp and circumstance went along with that? I mean, I know he went against orders, whoever it was. If he goes against orders and he shoots that arrow, it's all forgiven when everybody finds out who it is. When it's the king, they go, "All right, way to go. I don't know how you did that, but way to go." But then pomp and circumstance comes. You know, that's when everybody lifts him up on their shoulders. Everybody's screaming his name, right? And so, if that be the case, you know, there's no ceremony here. You know what? I would think you and I would probably be in the same boat to some degree, right? You know, wouldn't you be looking for something kind of amazing? You know, you hear that you can be cleansed of something that's really not cleansable. And then it is the most unassuming thing that one could think of. And so, no ceremony, no spectacle, but just a simple command. Well, that leads to a little bit of anger here. You know, pride leading to anger. Verse 11, look at verse 11. "But Naaman was wroth and went away and said, Behold, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of Jehovah's God and wave his hand over the place and recover the leper." You know, this is really, I know we've talked about this before, but this is like the Ernest Ainsley kind of a thing. You know, I know we've talked about this, but yeah, like, you know, you would think some kind of a magnificent thing would happen. He's going to heal you, right? I mean, that's what all of these faith healers do. They do something. They don't just go, "All right, you're healed." I mean, that's what Jesus did, mind you. But, you know, you didn't see all this. Well, hold on. Stand back, everybody. I've got this. You know, here, you want to see something amazing? I'm going to show you something amazing. He doesn't see any of that. He thought, something's going to happen. I'm going to go in here. He's going to maybe wave his hand over the spot where I've got leprosy. And then as he's waving it, maybe it goes away. Maybe it just falls off. Who knows what he was thinking? And so then, of course, he's angry about this. So he's wroth. He went away angry. Now, then it gets a little more in-depth on why he's angry. Look at verse 12 with me. "Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel?" So I could have gone back there, could have gone to those places, washed in, some clean water. Now, listen, I've not been to New York, but I know legend of the Hudson River. I hear it smells. I hear it's dirty. Growing up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, we have a nice little waterway going through there, man-made, but it's cleaner than that, I hear. I've gone to places where, you look and there's just muddy water. Or maybe you go down to Florida and there's just black water. Have you ever seen that? Black water? Yeah, it exists. Don't get in it, though, okay? That's crazy. So you go to these places, you see all this, but have you ever gone somewhere and you're just driving by? Maybe this. I can imagine this would happen in Colorado. As snow melts, and then you have this nice little creek there running, and you can see all the way down to the bottom where you see all those rocks, and man, that looks pretty. The Jordan is not like that. Jordan is dirty. Matter of fact, in modern times, we watched someone, they said, I want to be baptized in the Jordan. And as they were being baptized, this giant rat was swimming by them, okay? It's a gross river. It was gross then. It's gross now. I don't know. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. But it was legend then. Why would I go dip in that river? I could go dip in other rivers. You think about cleansing even, just think about that. Would you rather cleanse yourself in nice, pure water, or would you like to go over to a mud puddle and just cleanse that? Let's say you've got a wound, because leprosy is an open wound. What are you going to go cleanse with? Well, it makes perfect sense. You don't go into a river that looks like you would get an infection from it, okay? That is the idea. And yet, that was the command. Now, verse 12 says something else here. So, better than all the rivers in Israel, may I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. Now, I imagine how this has gone down, and let me just give you what I think here might have happened. As he's there, like you've probably seen, these different, I remember the old shows where like the guys, they'd get angry, and on today's shows, if the guy gets angry, he would pick this podium and he'd throw it halfway across the room to show his strength. Back in older shows, what you'd see is you'd get some guy and he'd get angry and he would just kind of do like that, and I can just kind of see him, isn't there any other rivers to go to? I mean, do I have to go back home? Are you kidding me? What is this? Going to the Jordan? This is crazy. This is outrageous. And then he kind of builds up into I'm not doing that. Are you kidding me? I'm not doing that. And then he walks off. He's not going to do it. Now, you think about what is going on. This is a very simple command. Now, and you would think anybody would do that, right? Anybody would obey a simple command that comes from God. No, not so. You know how I know not so? Because the same thing is done today. When you look at this, people still reject God's plan today because it is too simple. It is too simple. It's not what they expected. Again, what did Naaman expect? He expected some great thing. What do people expect today? They still expect some great thing, right? You know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Jesus to come into my heart, and he's going to do it. Or I'm going to ask for the Holy Spirit to guide me, and that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to do that very thing. Or, you know what? I'm going to get the preacher or pastor or whatever to lay his hands on me. I want a personal call of some kind. And you don't get it, right? You don't get it. Not out of the Bible, not what we see. And it offends their pride. It offends it. Everyone wants to be special. I get it. We all want to be special. And this is evidenced by what we desire. We always like the stories where someone lucks into power or someone lucks into money, And then you think about this, and you have these stories where someone is a chosen one, and they go, you know what, you are the only one able to do this task. And we like that thought. And it hurts us to think, you know, in these stories, there's nothing spectacular about this person. And really, if you think about it, guess what? Pretty much anybody could have done it. And you think about that even with us today. We do the same thing when it comes to romance, right? How do we do it there? Oh, you know what? I got to find my soulmate. But guess what? The Bible speaks nothing of soulmates. But what do you see? You have people that choose to love each other. Yeah, there's an attraction there, hopefully, but you know, you choose. You choose to love. And finding out, you know, I think this is a humbling thing, and young people, listen to me, find out this. There's no soulmate, but that you are actually compatible with lots of different people. But you sit down and you choose to love one. At least that's the way it's supposed to be. You love one. Not having something special happen to you that won't happen to anybody else ends up being offensive to a lot of people. I want something special to happen. Let's look at the turning point here. The turning point into humble obedience. Look at verses 13 and 14. It says, "And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it?" I mean, what if? Okay, so your leprosy is going to go away, but what you have to do is you have to climb Mount Hermon in order to do it. He would have done it, right? I've got to do it to be cleansed. If he had been asked to do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he said to thee, Wash and be clean? Then he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And so, look at this. He got some wise counsel that redirected him, right? If he bid thee to do some great thing, you know, how much would you have done it? You would have gone and cleansed yourself. Oh, it's not hard, right? But we know that he humbled himself because what did he do? He went ahead and he did it. He went down. And we know that he obeyed exactly because it says he dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan. He did that. You know, I remember growing up, this is probably one of the first things I can remember a preacher ever saying is, you know, you go and dip 1 time, does 1 time work? No. Does 2 times? Well, why don't you get close and do 6 times? Does any of that work? No. You have not obeyed God yet until you do what? The 7th time. And so, he obeyed. He didn't just, you know, it doesn't say here, you go and dip several times. Well, I dipped several times. Go and dip 7 times. And he did. And when he obeyed exactly, what do we see? We see that he was completely cleansed. It says, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Now, I've got to do this for particular reasons here, but I'm going to put my hand over my eyes here. Ladies, how would you like to be cleansed and not have any wrinkles or any fine lines or anything like that? Okay, I had to do that because one time I said something, I looked over at Jill, and she got on to me afterwards. So I made sure I'd learned my lesson. But wouldn't that be nice, right? Wouldn't it be nice? Have that. Listen, I got the little things going on here. I got the little creases in my head. I think I'm doing worse off than some of you in that regard, but, you know, wouldn't it be nice to be cleansed again like a little child? And so that's what happened to Naaman. All right. And so get over yourself and get in the water. Naaman's problem was not the water. It wasn't the leprosy even. It wasn't the prophet not coming out. It wasn't any of those things. It was pride. God's plan requires humility. In James 4 and verse 6 it says, God resisteth the proud, but gives grace unto the humble. God's plan requires obedience. Not any sort of substitution. Just straight obedience. And yet what do you have today? Lots of people trying to substitute things. What? Naaman named off some other rivers he'd like to go to, and yet that wouldn't have been obedience. That would have been a substitution. God wanted the Jordan, and so God decides the method, not us. We don't get to choose. You see, God's plan is simple, but it's not optional. And just as Naaman had to believe the message, he had to humble himself, he had to act in obedience, and he had to enter the water. Well, we do the same thing today. See, we need to believe, right? Mark 16:16, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that disbelieveth shall be condemned. He had to humble himself, right? Well, I think the ultimate act here, look at this. In Acts chapter 2 verse 38, repent ye and be baptized. You got to humble yourself and say, I've done wrong, and ask for forgiveness. Say, I need to turn away from that. And then, obviously, we need to act in obedience here, and we need to enter the water. Romans 6 verses 3 and 4, or are you ignorant that all who were baptized in Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? We were baptized, therefore, with him through baptism unto death, that like as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so we might also walk in newness of life. And then finally, you think about this in 1 Peter 3 and verse 21, the like figure whereunto even baptism doth also now save us, not the removal of the filth of the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience toward God. And so then finally, I want to mention this. Look what Naaman does. After he's been cleansed, Naaman turns to God. He follows God. Look at this. In 2 Kings 5, verses 15 through 17, and he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and came and stood before him, and he said, Behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. Now therefore I pray thee, take a present of thy servant. But he said, O Jehovah, as Jehovah liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. And Naaman said, If not yet, I pray thee, let there be given to thy servant 2 mules burden of earth, for thy servant will henceforth offer neither burnt offering nor sacrifice unto other gods, but unto Jehovah. No other gods. There's only one God, and we need to obey him. Naaman, if you think about this, he walked away almost without being cleansed. And how many today are in the same boat? Oh, they believe, right? They believe, but they won't obey. They know, but they won't submit. And they hear, but will never act. So let me offer this to you all this morning, and as a little bit of a challenge. When it comes to the Bible, we need to stop saying this, I think, or I feel, or I like. We just need to start asking, what did God say? What did he say? What does he want from us? And so, let me ask you this. For anyone who has not been baptized into Christ, if Naaman were here today, what do you think he would tell you? I think maybe he might just say, get over yourself and get in the water. If there's anybody here that needs to respond to the invitation, please come as we stand and as we sing.